Yeah, I'm recording now. Because
will you be editing, or you just use it live? Just
probably just use it as it is because I don't have time to edit.
All right.
But what you were just saying, I think that's really, I agree.
Well, let's have a little start to it.
Yeah.
So why don't you just say hello or something? It's Easter.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, thanks so much that we're actually making time to, both of us making time to have an opportunity to talk, which is really nice on Easter Sunday. Probably a very strange Easter Sunday for most people who even care to celebrate Easter or have any relationship to Easter. But it's a lot of families who, for the first time, don't get to be with each other, and even those ones are maybe the lucky ones. They're the ones who are worried about people in hospital or people taking care of people in hospital. So yeah, strange days. Wonderful to see you again, John. It's been a while since we talked.
Thank you for asking me. It's great to be here.
And yeah, we just, before we started recording, we had this brief, like you were saying that in many ways ecosystems restoration camp has also been a strategy to prepare people for the skills we need in crises to come, and at the same time do what is possible to do to ameliorate the crises that are already on the horizon. And now we're kind of right in the middle of a crisis that will just increase the need for such work. And I completely agree. For me, what I'm interested in is the way to scale link what is effectively a relatively small piece of land and a bunch of people coming together to learn on that piece of land how to restore it to its wider community and its regional context, like the way that common land works on landscape scales, and then the ERC in Spain was just a small part of that. And I think that scaling structure I find actually really interesting, because that also bridges it into how to provide for an entire small city and its region. How do you see the way that as more and more ERCs establish themselves around the world, that they don't become like sort of small anarchic training grounds, but a real mix of people really wanting to also engage with mainstream and help normal people in learning how to restore ecosystems?
Yeah, I think that's the real goal.
Mm-hmm.
So the hardest part usually is to start. And what we see now is that there are very large numbers of organizations and very large numbers of individuals around the world who share the same intention, understanding that we need to have clean drinking water. We should be able to drink from the rivers, really. And we need to have fertile organic soils with healthy microbiologic communities, both bacterial and fungal communities that have a important and vital role in creating life on Earth. And so to imagine the Earth without these healthy microbiological communities is sort of ridiculous, really.
Absolutely.
And then we need to understand the role of the biomass, the height of the canopy, the accumulation of organic materials, changing the soil temperatures, the temperatures on the surface of the earth, and what that does to affect the hydrological cycle, the circulation of moisture, the natural regulation of the climate. And then probably most important, we have to understand the relationships between all the various species and the primacy, really, of biodiversity. That this is really the expression of evolutionary succession, and it's critical for health and for balance in the earth. So these particular things are natural laws. They're not something that's my opinion or anybody, it doesn't matter what we think about, it matters that we understand these things, because these are giving us, and
No, no,
they have, yeah, they produce the air and the water and the soil. So the camps idea is not to just restore a tiny place. The camps idea is, I think you need to separate it into infrastructure and mission. You know, so the infrastructure is a way to allow people to do this work, to get the knowledge that they need. And we can also use this at a time like this where we're in crisis. I think in the last 3 weeks, over 16 million people in the United States became unemployed. And that's in addition to the vast numbers of homeless and marginal people already. So that's probably going to increase by tens of millions of people over the next couple of months. That's,
John, I'm completely aligned with you. Like, and I think that most of the people that would listen to us completely understand that this is the great work of our time, and you have led us and started a whole movement of people wanting to do this work. What I'm saying is, I've been on this mission as well for the like 15, 20 years. And having worked with many of the pioneering ecovillages that are basically fully established ecovillage restoration camps with initiatives that have actually restored large landscape areas, whether it's Oroville or Tamara or Findhorn or the projects that have grown out of Findhorn. And what I've learned by being with these communities is that there comes a point that these projects also need to engage with the people who mean well but are stuck in public authorities of the local and regional government, the local mayor, the local guy of the planning office, and somehow really embed this as a whole regional economic activity in the sense of regional
I mean, what we see, I think you have to, you know, I take a slightly different tack than you do, because first of all, I think that the ecosystem restoration camps and eco-villages are symbiotic, but they're not the same. Mm-hmm. I think that the ecosystem restoration camps are a temporary step for a lot of people. And when those people move on, then a next group of people need to get the same information. And when they have the ability to control water, soil, plants, and biodiversity, and they have some experience in interpersonal relations and conflict resolution, then they can go to ecosystem restoration camps. They'll be much better at making these types of long-term societal changes work. Without those skills, I think it will be very, very hard. And on the other side about economics, I think that we have to look at economics, business as usual, and realize that we might not be able to do business as usual in the future. Right. That we may be looking at the collapse of financial systems and the collapse of currencies here. So in that case, we really need to figure out and live the change we want to see on the earth.
Absolutely.
And so
for this, we need to work with everybody then. Otherwise,
yes, it has to be a collective consciousness of humanity that identifies the way forward. It's not about individuals deciding for everyone else what's going to happen. And so I think what we have to have are profound and nuanced conversations where we're discussing this. And we can't just seek all the reasons why we're going to fail. We need to seek the reasons why we're going to succeed. We need to seek, and like within this current crisis that we see, there's some really very interesting outcomes. How many people are sitting around with their families or just communicating with their families over long distances, but feeling from their heart how important it is to have family and friends
and nature connection,
love, communities. And so this is very different from the rat race, running around. So one of the things that I've been feeling lately is like, you can succeed in the rat race, but you're still a rat. If you do that, you might want to relax into trying to figure out what it means to be a human being, rather than get on the treadmill and run around in a circle.
No, but I completely, utterly agree. Like right now, what's happening here on Mallorca, just to give you one example, like I moved to Mallorca because I'm interested in the bioregional transformation that includes the activity that ecosystems restoration camps would train people up to do, which is large landscape restoration, both to bring back forests and healthy rivers, and also to grow healthier regenerative agriculture, food and biomaterials, all of that. If the reason I moved to Mallorca is because Mallorca as an island is a great example of such a bioregional case study, and completely humbly knowing that one person can't change that system, but I wanted to see what, by making a commitment to one place, I could do over 20, 30, 40 years, building network and nurturing a vision and a collective activity. And now, because of what's happened, this is like what you said, 16 million people got unemployed in the United States. Here, there's barely 1 million people, and more than half of them are now unemployed, because there is like 80% is tourism industry, and there is no tourism anymore. And I completely agree that what I would love to see for this island is to not for the government to spend money so people can just mill around until maybe in 2021 or 2022 they recuperate some form of business in the tourism industry, pretending they can go back to where they were. I would love to see everybody engaging in ecosystems restoration and getting this, like if the government has to pay people a basic citizen income and money anyway, we might as well engage people with the land again and do this kind of work. So I'm completely with you. I'm just saying, how do we fit it into these realities of a bioregion like Mallorca?
Well, I think you have to have we have to reach calm. Mm-hmm. We have to be, all of us need to become calm. And the answers don't come intellectually. Mm-hmm. Exactly. They come from being able to understand it and imagine it. And then they come from having a shared intention.
Yeah, I agree.
So in order for people to grasp this, there's a great deal of uncertainty. There's a great deal of anxiety now. So it's very important to be calm in this situation. It's very important to be empathetic and compassionate now. So seeking the intellectual reasons, I mean, I can tell you my opinion, I can tell you what I think, but I don't think that's going to be the determining factor for what happens. I think that might help to inform what happens. And so I think we have both a crisis, and it's both serious risk and it's great opportunity now. So the opportunity seems to be in the economic realm, which you started to discuss. I think on the one hand, we can offer this ecosystem restoration camps methodology as a way to put in central kitchens and to have zero waste, zero packaging, zero pollution, only organic, only biodynamic, only local, only fair trade food. And we can feed people this way. Now that's one major benefit in a crisis like this. So instead of having kind of sad, tragic soup kitchens, let's have joyous meals together in a slow food movement that's not wasting food, that's taking this food out of the transactional economic system and making it available to everybody. So there's going to be no waste, there's going to be no packaging, no pollution, and there's going to be no hunger. because we're going to commit that the community eats. Everybody in this community eats. Now that's first. Second, if we're able to generate simple, safe, comfortable, warm, semi-nomadic housing options like teepees or yurts or Bedouin tents or safari tents that are acceptable for people to live in, those people who are homeless, for instance, would love this. But I've been on safari. Have you been on safari in Africa? It's lovely. So it's a nice way to live. I've been in yurts in Mongolia and teepees in the plains. They're elegant architecturally, culturally, brilliant. So they're nice to stay there. So having a safety in that we know that like there's going to be, we can take care of homelessness, we can take care of hunger. Next, we need to take care of employment. So most of the employment in the existing economy is just to buy and sell junk. Or worse, it's speculation between the cost price and interest-bearing debt, which is essentially just this kind of corrupt non-economy. It's a type of indentured servitude. So that's bigger than the real economy of extraction, manufacturing, and buying and selling. And then you have all this fossil fuel and all this other stuff. So that economy is failing. And we need to recognize this. That economy actually has failed long ago because it's devastated vast areas of the planet. It's created billions of desperately poor people and the super rich. So, you know, it's a failure. So what are we going to do now? I don't think we need to attack the existing economy or the existing powers. They need to take care of themselves. And like you said, if they're able to right the ship and don't sink it now, that's good. That's good. Definitely. That'll be more time to prepare. But if they're unable to right the ship, then the ship's going down now. So what are we going to do? Ecosystem restoration camps with central kitchens and the ability to take care of people at this time would be critical, is critical. And if we can apply this to the refugees and the migrants and the homeless and the post-traumatic stress disorder veterans, even better. So the ideas which are within this are so important for the current situation and important for the restoration of the ecological systems for future generations. So there are many reasons why this should happen. But how do you do that is not up to an individual to say, well, we're going to do it this way. So John said we're going to all go. That's not the way it works. The people who are leading are the organizations, for instance, Via Organica in Mexico, or the group in India, or the group in Somalia, or the Second community in Egypt, and of course Findhorn, Tamara, and Auroville, and Occidental Arts and Ecology here in California. All of these have been working for decades, and now we're seeing that we have to bring all this together into a mycelial network where everything that's learned immediately goes around the world. So if we learn how to grow fungal inoculants that can massively increase fungal availability in soils, then we need to teach everybody how to do that right away. And when we have these things in place and we're all dedicated to this, and we also have to do something else. Besides these, I would say, necessary things that we have to do, we also have to slow down, stop consuming so much, have no pollution, and we need to have an interaction. And where can we do that? We can do that in ecosystem restoration camps. And when people go through ecosystem restoration camps, they can all find out, do I agree with this? Do I want to work with each other for the well-being of everyone? That's where you get the change.
No, I completely, I hear your vision. Just so you understand, like I've been, I dropped out or dropped in or whatever you want to call it. In 1999, I moved to southern Spain, wanting to set up an environmental education center and little community, teaching people about how to restore the land, put straw bale buildings up, compost toilets, organic gardens, permaculture, all of that. I traveled in a VW van around Europe, visiting a lot of these sites. I've slept in yurts, all of that. I completely see how all of that is such an amazing emergency response to the current crisis and the migrant crisis, and there's huge potential for that. There's also somehow this linking into how do we, because we don't know exactly how quickly the dying system is going to die and the midwifing is going to happen for the new system we want to birth. And so I feel that linking these initiatives with local government and initiatives like
Absolutely.
Common Land is it's just a wider, more scale-linked approach where we...
This is a participatory
Yeah.
project.
Mhm.
Anyone who chooses to act and lead is the leader. So, all you have to do is say, I'm part of the ecosystem restoration camps movement. I want it to go in this direction. I want to go to the mayor, or I want to go to the governor, or I want to go to the president, and I want to say, look, we can do this. Please do. Everyone has that opportunity. No one says, well, don't do that, or ask me what's going on. This is happening around the world now. So there are already camps in 6 different continents. And as this emerges, then they all have to make their way.
I mean, John, we had a conversation, I think it was actually inside the Universal Hall in 2014, when you were basically going pregnant with this vision. And to think that what has happened since, I mean, wow, really amazing to see how sounding that note has just sort of moved into a vacuum of people wanting to say, I want to stop talking about regeneration. I want to do it. And I want to do it with the land I love here. And that's, I mean, I'm like, I don't know if you saw this, I sent it to you a few weeks back, a PDF of a friend of mine who here on Mallorca has started what he calls Baleares Verde. And the idea is to basically start with every little pocket of land that a private landowner is willing to turn over to be turned into an agroforestry system, and just teach people as we go along. And in that process, plant at least 1 million trees, but not as just any type of trees, but as agroforestry, edible forest food and biomaterials production systems. But I also think by bringing in common land, and that's why I love the way that there is a sort of link in terms of genesis between common land and ERCs, because while common land speaks more to conventional landowners, larger landowners, associations of agriculturalists that might even currently be more conventional, I see that that's the pattern that I face here in Mallorca. And so for me, that's a really interesting strategy to actually present to the locals this possibility of partnering with common land through existing associations of landowners, and then partnering with a few pockets to create little ecosystems restoration camps. And
I think this perfectly serves the movement.
Yeah.
So I would absolutely agree to this, but this is not about, so I'm able to decide what I do. So, I see the way forward as ecosystem restoration camps because it empowers the maximum number of people to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And that has the biggest impact. And that I understand from my experiences and my observations that everyone is equal. So there is no real hierarchy because we're all going to die. Maybe the COVID-19 is telling us this too, that we're all equal. And what we've done in the past is we've changed the world into this materialistic world where you pay for your rights. And if you don't have any money to pay for your rights, you don't have any rights. This is not the way forward. This is a recipe for tremendous suffering, world war, revolution. It's going to be bad. So we need to figure out, how do you give back the sovereignty and the dignity and the creativity and the energy, the results. So now we have we talk about workers. So workers are sitting on their sofa watching TV if they're not working. And what are they working at? Or how many people love what they're doing and are working at something that they are their hearts and entire being is satisfied by what they're doing? Many people are just trying to get a paycheck to survive. And so what are they doing? Sometimes they're making plastic gewgaws. Sometimes they're doing nothing, that's of great importance just to get this money. What we need is for everyone's work to be meaningful, to do something that has something to do with life, that has something to do where they're satisfied, intellectually, spiritually satisfied that they're doing what's right. And this has not yet emerged. We need to realize this. So this is another way. What I see the ecosystem restoration camps as being is this place to experiment. And if you're using, for instance, common land or other methodologies, that's great. But the choice is common land. So common land must say, oh, we love ecosystem restoration camps, and that's what we're going to support here. And at the other side, we're going to continue to do what we've been doing. So right now, the large scale things which are invested are threatened by the collapse of the system. So now you need the ecosystem restoration camps even more. And we need to find the alternatives. I would recommend, for instance, the real question is, what is money? Now we think that the money is coming to us from these capital formations which have been developed over historical time. And we can talk about that if you want to, but the fact of the matter is that there is another type of value that has been zero in the existing economy. Well, that can't be right. That's disenfranchised billions of people and made them desperately poor at the edges of deserts. So how do we address these? How do we connect those two issues? How do we say, oh, look, they're reforesting, they're restoring the grasslands, they're restoring the wetlands. That's real value. So that's got to be the basis of wealth. That's got to be the basis of the economy. So if that's the economy, then you can give people an income for doing this. And if you want to go back to the other way and you want to say, okay, we have to use business as usual because we have the governments and we have these capital formations and these are the workers. That, you have to have this conversation with everyone, not with me only, but with everyone. I know what I feel about it. I've been to every continent. I've seen.
You are preaching the converted. We're on the same.
No, I'm talking to you and to anybody else who's watching this recording.
But what I mean is, for me, the only nuance where I feel like, in terms of energy, what I'm trying to explore with you, but in not way saying that I'm right or wrong, is this how to not be a divisive force between the dying world and the world.
Absolutely.
Birth, but being, and if it means in the right moment at the right time, not necessarily saying what is 100% right, but to build the bridge, to keep people on board rather than to keep the frontiers coming up. Like right now, what I see is here on Mallorca, lots of unemployed people that have for decades only worked in tourism, and all they know is tourism. For them to reconnect them to the love of the island, to the beauty of La Isla de la Calma, the calm island that this place was, and then to reconnect them to the, which is already happening right now in the crisis. The local farmers are starting, like I've been for years been eating organic vegetable boxes from a local farmer who I know, who comes every Tuesday and brings me part of the harvest. But now everybody is experiencing that again. Like people are suddenly hearing news flashes about the local milk factory is saying, we don't sell our milk to the tourists anymore because there aren't any tourists. Can we get the Mallorquin to buy our milk again, please? And the Mallorquin are saying, of course we'll buy local milk instead of imported milk. And so somehow this has turned up the contrast on so
Isn't
many
that great?
yeah, that we've been.
That's so great.
But it's also the bizarre things, like, I mean, for the vegans, it's hard to hear, but here on the island, there were people who were just growing lambs for Easter, for right now, and they would kill the lambs and take them straight to the hotels for the Easter business. Now there is no Easter business. Now there is no infrastructure to put these lambs, to freeze these lambs.
May I suggest something? Parties.
Pardon?
Parties. As soon as either distributed parties where you or
yeah, but right now we're not allowed to do parties.
I know, but
in Spain, it's ridiculous. I'm not even allowed into the street to go for a walk or do some exercise.
Oh, that's terrible.
Like we're literally under house arrest, police controlled. We're police patrolling the streets and fining people 600 to 1,000 euros for disobeying if they decide that they want to buy some sweets for their children. And
that's intense. That's really intense. This is not happening here.
Yeah, no,
we're asked to wear masks and gloves, and so we have masks and gloves.
I mean, John, for the first time, like for me, it's been such a teacher, this, because I haven't thought as much about a punitive system that thinks it's right to take people's freedom just because they've sold a bit of weed. I mean, feeling right now, what it's like to just be locked in my own house and only be allowed out for one big shop once a week. And if they catch me any other way, they can fine me, and they are controlling it. Like, I'm stuck in a flat. My mother's house is empty and it's only 15 minutes away from here, and it has a bit of garden where I could plant stuff. I'm not legally allowed to move to that house. I would break the law if I did.
Wow.
And there's police between here and there that would probably stop us from getting there, because you can't have more than one person in the car. It's like suddenly I'm living what it's like to be in an oppressed regime. But I'm also realizing how bloody fortunate I've been that I've lived into my 40s to have that experience. Like how privileged I have been in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this is doing to so many people in different ways. That we learn also that all the menial workers that were in the streets asking for bigger salaries are now the ones keeping people alive and keeping systems going. It's amazing. Yeah.
So I think this is a surprising moment. I think it described to me, I don't know if I mentioned this to you earlier, but this was described to me as a flux in time and space or something, like there are new dimensions opening up and you can go through a portal to the other side, or you can fall through a hole. So like if we fail to keep our spirits up, fail to survive this, you fall through a hole. If you and millions of people are falling through the hole. Now that's the reality, and we have to be aware that this is happening. And also, I think on the other side, you have these sort of reactionary, I mean, it's almost fascist type responses. So you see this emerging that there are people who just want to be in control.
But also, I mean, I wonder what your opinion is on this, because of course, this discussion has been around now that we're really at this point, either it's full taking responsibility direct participatory democracy on the ground, people enabled by subsidiarity, where they can make choices about their place, their region, their community in global collaboration, or you get the AI controlled superstate like in China, where people get ratings on how often they smile in class.
Yeah.
And
I think you're going to have to do this on a distributed horizontal way.
yeah.
I don't think you can have, like, even China experienced this early on in communism. They tried to determine what agricultural systems would be used, and that's ridiculous. The local people know much more about their biodiversity and what's growable in their region. So it was a miserable failure.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the trend over historical time has been toward individual rights. Now, that may have gone too far with these people who are sort of nihilistic. There's a nihilism aspect to materialism,
Mm-hmm.
where nobody believes in anything, nobody cares about other people, and they just want more stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's got to stop. That's really the extreme expression of the worst possible stuff. But where we are now is that human civilization is at risk. We talked about this at the Commonwealth thing, and we thought it was from climate change. But so climate change is an existential risk. Nuclear weapons are an existential risk.
But they're all symptoms of a worldview and a value system.
But it's human civilization that's at risk,
Yeah.
not the earth or life. And so what we need to do is we need to have a deep processing of what it means to be human beings, and that this is our time, and we are called to do certain things. So it's very important to define and understand what are the things that we're called to do. Absolutely. So we're called to address the climate issues, address the ecological disruptions that have taken place over historical time. We're called to treat everyone equally, find a way that human civilization can include everyone and engage everyone and empower everyone, rather than enriching a few and disenfranchising billions. If we don't take that step, we're in serious trouble now. So we're at the edge here of that. But we also have to stop the toxicity, and not only stop the toxicity, but we have to clean it all. I mean, we have to take these blood feuds that are connected to thousands of years ago. One brother killed another brother and lied about it. And then now, hundreds of generations later, nobody remembers the original crime, but everybody hates everybody.
But this is so fascinating that it is like, because what often happens, because we're both very passionate about the ecosystems restoration part, but to understand that regeneration is also where you were just going, is also deeply social, and it is actually trauma work and grief work and going deep about understanding connection and the deeper questions: who are we, where are we going, why are we here, who are we obliged to, what is it to be human, is life a planetary process, or are we just like fighting for individual survival? It's, I mean, the whole worldview of even feeling trapped in the skin, not understanding that you are a walking ecosystem, I'm a walking ecosystem. I mean, talking ecosystems restoration, it starts with drinking some kefir and good clean water to get the right microbiome in your gut.
I think it's also that we need to be considering an understanding of the evolution of human consciousness, or the evolution of human knowledge. So somehow, I was a journalist, so I just ran around taking pictures and showing people what was going on. But then I started to research, ecology. And when I did this, I realized that we all have a very limited understanding about things. And the further that you go in understanding the life systems on the earth, the sort of more grounded or more aware you are of how fragile life is. So we're all living for a few decades, and that's it. And it happens, life, I would say death is easy. Life is hard. So it's hard to live where you're conscious of what's going on, where your life's energy is focused and concentrated and making something manifest. And I think these are the things that I've been learning about. How do you do that? And you don't do it by yourself. We are meta-organisms. So when we only think of ourselves, we're very limited. But when we stop thinking about ourselves, but we think about sort of more collaborative and more larger scale. I mean, Einstein said, if you can't solve the problem, make it bigger. I think that's a very good idea. Make it bigger. And when you make it bigger, you go, well, I can't deal with that personally. But then you realize, well, there is an agency that can take care of that. It's humanity. If the worldview is that we're all part of this, that we're moving forward, that it's in our interest and the interest of our children and future generations to work for the ecological systems.
Let me ask you a question there, because for me, this is a really interesting point. Because I can sometimes also fall a little bit into the kind of belief where I said, like, if we only all kind of had a full understanding of a sort of Thich Nhat Hanh interbeing type, like the story of interbeing, being connected, if we all were just keen to live the questions together and create regenerative cultures, is the language I would be using. But what I'm increasingly thinking is that as human development, whether you use like
spiral dynamics,
if you just using that as an example of the kind of dynamics of how people go through different stages and go from a sort of egocentric to a family-centric, tribe-centric, species-centric, life-centric.
Just one moment. Just one moment. I'm
sure.
How long do you think we're going to need? Because I just want to
let's wrap it up in 10 minutes.
Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
It's so nice to hear from people because I'm still sort of I'm a house guest, but I'm trapped with a lovely family here. But
yeah, just briefly, like there was this key point of basically how do we need to, like, rather than assuming that we somehow manage to get everybody on board and really get this, how do we actually work with a system where there'll always be some people who are still on the journey and who are not getting
everybody is on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's somewhere on the journey, and that journey leads to another dimension when we leave this dimension. And so while we're in this dimension and while we're together in this dimension, we need to see that actually what we think, what we do, what we say, how we act, all has an impact.
All has absolutely.
And I think in terms of what we're mainly talking about, right now we have a society which is in great confusion. So it's polarized in different ways. It's all over the place. It's a mess. We're in the Chinese parlance, we're living in interesting times, which is not a good thing. You know, we would rather look at the moon and drink warm wine and write poetry, but instead we're dealing with these enormous forces which are changing society. And we know the mistakes in the economy. We know the mistakes, the corruptions in governance. We know the lack of freedom, and which takes away the responsibility from the people, which is a big mistake, because the people have the power and the ability, and the majority of people are good. This, I think, is what I've mainly learned. And what I would say about this, what you just said about that having everybody, we're not going to have everybody. We don't need everybody yet. Everybody will do what they're going to do. We need a critical mass. And this critical mass has to see that, okay, whether it happens quickly or it happens gradually, or it happens in fits and starts, or however it happens, we're going in another direction. We're going toward an ecologically biodiverse, functional Earth systems, and we're going toward a human civilization. So I would actually make sure that there is a discussion about primacy and about secondary systems. So governance and economics, these are secondary systems. The primary system is the oxygenated atmosphere, the hydrological cycle, the soil fertility, and the biodiversity. So we have to know this, and we have to understand that the gradual trend in human civilization is toward human rights, toward dignity, toward freedom, toward justice. Now, those things are threatened by fascism, by totalitarianism, by corruption, by lies, and by those who wish to control, by violence. You know, the majority of people, they're not interested in violence, but somebody is. So somebody is arming vast numbers of people with huge things. But the great thing about being a journalist was I saw the armies refuse to fire, and the collapse of the Soviet Union and this changes in East Europe, because the armies are the children of the people. So when push comes to shove, they're not going to do what some horrible tyrant wants them to do. They're going to say, no, that's my mother, my father, my grandmother, my brother and sister out there. And they're going to stop. That's what happened after, well, you know, that's what happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The leaders issued live ammunition, and the troops in all kinds of countries said, no, I don't believe I will. And that's an interesting thing. You know, if the guy says, shoot them, you know, I mean, and they go, no. Yeah. And then they turn around and say, hey, buddy, you know, forget it. You're done now. So look at what happened to Ceausescu. I mean, Ceausescu is like the ultimate example of this.
But even what happened in the last 4 weeks, that ultimately the world over, people were willing to take this destructive, murderous economic system that has actually killed more people than the virus, and drive it against the wall pretty much, in order to save the old and the weak. And I think that's a sign that we're not as horrible a species as sometimes we're taught in school. We should be.
We're not a horrible species. Yeah. We're human beings. We're just a flawed, you know, we're not perfect. We have choice, we have free will, and we often make the wrong decisions, you know. So we need to also be gentle and forgiving and compassionate and empathetic, and realize that, well, nobody's perfect, but the closer we come to our ideals, the better we define our values and we act on our values, the better things come out. Now, I think that where we are right now is that the ecosystem restoration camps is an idea whose time has come.
Absolutely.
The need for this is enormous. It is the lowest cost and the highest outcome in terms of engaging people, protecting people at this high-risk moment, and engaging them in what we need to do to ensure sustainability and survival of human civilization in the future. So what I would recommend is all who understand this, they need to come together. And if that reaches critical mass, whatever that may be, whatever size, but anyway, everyone who understands it is an ally now. And it's not about institution building. It's not about personal gain. It's not about just one country or another. It's about human civilization, wherever they understand this, acting to feed the people, acting to give them temporary shelter so that no one unnecessarily suffers at this time. And then within this, in this infrastructure that we're talking about, which is the cheapest way to do this, collectivize the central kitchens and feed everybody. Remove the food from the transactional economics so that there's no food wasted. I mean, the idea that half of the food that's grown is thrown away or something like that is ridiculous. Feed everybody now. And then engage these people in ecosystem restoration in a gentle way. I would recommend 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and the rest of the time, study, have slow food, beautiful meals together, do recreation, slowly come back together after this crisis is over and build the future.
So tell me, before we wrap up, maybe if I get this out before next Saturday, maybe tell me a little bit of a plan for what next Saturday is about.
Saturday is about maybe having this conversation that we're having, but having it be in public and having it be very calm. So we think it's necessary, for instance, the indigenous people in this region will open the conversation. And there'll be many people talking about human restoration, societal restoration, not just ecosystem restoration. And we'll talk about the camps. We'll talk about social and human restoration. We'll talk about regenerative agriculture. Well, we'll talk about ecology and the water cycle. Then we'll talk about
I saw what
agriculture, regenerative agriculture.
Andy Langford and Tom Duncan, and who else do you have at the top of your head?
Jane Goodall. I've just been talking with Jane Goodall. I think she's preparing to participate and also to promote it. We're going to look at also the economics. So Willem is invited to present the common land, and we'll talk to the people who are doing the Kiss the Ground. It's been a group working to promote regenerative agriculture mainly.
Yes, and from Second?
Yes, Second.
Yeah, nice.
It'll I think it's either Helmi or Maximilian Abulayesh, one of those two.
I saw Andy was there quite a few times, Langford from Gaia University.
Well, he's going to be talking mainly, I think we have him in the part talking about Syria. Yeah. He's been talking with the United Nations and has a plan to go into Syria. And we're going to have people from Somalia who are working, and we're going to have the Indian camp is in Bihar. It's actually in crisis now. There's 100,000
Mm-hmm.
people walking from Delhi to Bihar. All the people who were sellers or, street sellers or anything, they're all gone. They have to leave. And so they're headed for Bihar, and they're worried about feeding them. So I think they're going to say, hey, this is maybe the sharp edge of the spear here. And, this is where we are also talking about how ecosystem restoration camps movement can help in these kinds of things. And we have to look at this, but people are suffering all over the world. But I mean, you're in another level of suffering if you're walking to Bihar and you have no food when you get there.
You know that, I mean, what I find is so important at this point is, as you kind of was addressing earlier, is to really link up all these networks. Because, for example, Ruth Andrade, who works with Lush, has been really active behind the scenes with this, what was it called, the Blueprint Network, which grew out of the Ecovillage network. But it's basically people who are permaculture, agroforestry, those kind of teachers who have experience of going into crisis areas and rebuilding after disaster. And I think that's where I feel, why I'm so passionate as an educator about ERCs, is that it's the mechanism of scaling up the skilling up, or scaling out the skilling up, getting more people engaged. And really that needs, I was super excited to see Guy Education and Ecosystems Restoration Camps now doing this online course where they highlight some really amazing stories, like my friend Galen with Biomatrix Water, who you met at Findhorn. I think we really need to bring the movement together, and ERCs is at the
I would call it like a living laboratory that should be available to all the organizations and all the individuals who need to use it. So all those people who studied permaculture for decades and then don't have anything to do, have a lot of trouble. They're all trying to sell PDC courses, or they're trying to grow vegetables to sell in the farmer's market or something. They have to inhabit the ecosystem restoration camps and be the trainers, and they should have jobs for life. There's another thing we're talking about. We're talking about value and alternative currency, really, and the bridge between the alternative currency and the existing economic system. So what Earth Bank is talking about is a debit card connected with a token. The token is a blockchain protected value system, similar to what you would, if you went to the supermarket and you bought some groceries and they gave you some stamps and you said, you can get some dishes or something, but basically the value in this token is determined by all who trust in the token. So everybody who uses the token basically sets this group who's creating it and using it gets to set the value. So when people do more work, they can get more value in their thing. We can even denominate that in fiat currency and put it into the debit card where it can be used in the existing economy everywhere in the world. And by doing this in all the camps around the world, we've created an alternative economic system, which could be very helpful for those people who are refugees or homeless or whatever. And then it's just about a matter of being in deep meditation and working together hard to not make this about individual interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to understand that there have already been 2 Nobel Prizes for the understanding that if you pursue individual interest to the point that it erodes the collective interest, it's not in your interest anymore. So it's in all of our interest to move forward. And economics and social and psychological and social psychological health, they're all needed.
No, I mean it's what like I call it the shift from competitive advantage to collaborative advantage. It's definitely it just doesn't make sense. Like, and that's the enlightened self-interest, is to understand you need to help everybody do well. That's the best way to do well, and so yours do well. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. You can let me know how you see me. Is it 3 hours, everybody online?
Well, if you, it's up to you.
Uh-huh.
So the people who are presenting something, they're they're going to be called like 10 minutes before they're going to go on to make sure that they're there. But we're going to have a green room, and that green room will be a Zoom conversation. We're not going out on Zoom. We're going, the people who are presenting are going in. You're welcome to be in the green room for 3 hours or whatever. It may even be more. Yeah. But you can come or go or whatever you want.
Cool, I get
it. And then I believe we're going to record that conversation, and we're going to have another. If you want to get on the live stream, you might have to go. So you'll be in touch. There'll be a moderator in the green room, Zoom. And if somebody's chosen to go into the thing, they're going to have to go to another Zoom.
Oh, okay.
And then they'll be switched through the switcher to the very fast internet connection going out. We're having music. It's lovely. The Appalachia Rising, Playing for Change.
Yeah, nice.
It's going to be really quite nice.
Cool.
We're coming from a recording studio. You might even hear me play guitar.
I'll be tired because just before it starts, I do a 2-hour online workshop with some people in Lisbon on education and regenerative cultures, but maybe that'll just boost me up. So it's been really lovely to connect with you, and I'll see you next Saturday, and we're on the same mission, and I'm deeply grateful you're out there, man.
My earth is your earth.
Yeah.
My heart is your heart. My spirit is your spirit. We are working together.
Simple as that. Be well.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.